Welcome to Theatre International World's Indigenous Peoples. I'm your host, Rey Allen. At this segment, I would like to pay tribute to a great warrior of indigenous peoples, the late Esmeralda V. Brown, who made her transition on Saturday, September 28th, 2019. She was a great friend, great colleague, working in the struggle for indigenous rights. I had the pleasure of working with her from 1993 to the present. And in 1995, she became the chairperson of the World's Indigenous Peoples Decade, in which I served as her vice chair for a few years, for 3 years. And so with great grief and sorrow, we salute the work in which she has been doing throughout the world. And at this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a dear friend of mine, great colleague, and we've worked over 25 years together. Wow. Bevin Turnbull. Bevin, welcome to World's Indigenous Peoples.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
You're quite welcome. We have a lot to talk about in terms of the work in which you've been doing as composer of New Jazz City, which now is going to become a musical,
right.
A new musical, right. New Jazz City musical. Yeah. But before we get into our December 7th production of New Jazz City, right. Let's go back a bit in terms of talking about your life as a composer, arranger, and also the executive artistic director of Bronx Renaissance Theater. All right. Let's talk a little bit about that, and then I want to speak to you about two of your books that you have written.
Right. Well, back in 2001, around the time of 9/11, we were working with a group of kids at St. Luke's Episcopal Church in the Bronx. And we did a play called War Comes to Willie Freeman. We made an original play with original music based upon the novel by James Lincoln Collier. And it was quite a success. It was interesting that it was a patriotic play that we happened to be doing around that time. Everybody was kind of united around this tragic thing that had happened to all of the people of the world, particularly the United States. So then from there, we started doing various types of plays. We did comedies. We did Chocolate Fever. Very often we take pieces from children's literature or young adult literature. And then we also did Shakespeare. We did Taming of the Shrew and Romeo and Juliet, and all with original music. So I always was energized by having to write.
So you wrote the music for all
right,
these shows.
Exactly. So we eventually made the rounds, various community centers, other churches, and I guess the pinnacle of what we achieved during that time, during those first 15 years or so, we did at Lincoln. I'm looking ahead, right?
Lincoln Center.
At Lehman Stages, we did Galileo Park. Now, Galileo Park included so many elements. It had religious elements. It talked about...
Tell us a little bit about Galileo Park.
It was basically the conflict between science and the church establishment. Because, as you know, they almost had Galileo... because of his ideas, but it was beautiful. And then, when we did it at Lehman, you played Galileo, which was wonderful.
That's right.
And one of the most memorable lines is that, imagine here it is in 1604, early 1600s, Galileo was explaining to one of his students, Sagredo, that sometimes as the moon appears to us on Earth, from the moon, the Earth would appear sometimes a crescent, sometimes full, sometimes not visible at all. And just that kind of thinking is what almost had him eliminated, you know, because
you wrote a very moving song for that.
Longing to witness a crescent Earth.
Yes,
Longing
wonderful.
to witness a crescent Earth. Yeah.
Yes. At another time, I'm going to have you back on the World's Indigenous Peoples. We're going to talk more about Galileo.
Yes,
because
yes.
it's a fantastic show. Now, let's talk a little bit about your beginnings. Did you always want to be a musician, or were there any other career in which you wanted to go into?
Well, from the time I was a little kid, they called me Little Doc. My father was a doctor, right? And so
What kind of
loved
doctor is
science.
it?
He was
Of medicine?
of medicine, right? He went to Howard University, and I ended up going to Howard University also. And it was expected that I was going to be a doctor, right? And I was always interested in the sciences. It turned out that I was able to put some science into my music and music into my science. So eventually,
Great
but my father made a mistake. If he wanted me to be a doctor, he took me to see all the greatest players in the world. We'd go to the Newport Jazz Festival, see Miles Davis and Ray Charles and Ella Fitzgerald and Duke Ellington. And I was spoiled by that, you know. I mean, because they made such an imprint. I wanted to be like those men up there on that stage.
So your father was really into jazz.
Absolutely, yes.
Did he play?
He played piano beautifully. And thankfully, he had that piano in the house. And so I was able to pick up where he left off. I can't leave this out, that he had one of his offices was downstairs in our home. And
Here in the Bronx.
here in the Bronx, right? And the piano was upstairs in the living room. And after I left Howard University, in all that confusion of being a musician or being a scientist and doctor, I left Howard and I told my father, I'm going to go back, but I want to get myself together. And so he didn't speak to me for about 2 years, right? But the point...
Because he wanted you to be a doctor.
That's right. The point at which he spoke to me was he came upstairs one day and he saw me playing the piano and he said, so that's what you've been doing. You know, it was a revelation to him that this is what my son has been doing. And of course he knew that all that it would take, because he was a fine pianist himself. So he had that conflict early, but he decided to go into medicine.
Wow. So was there any particular moment that made you make the switch to music?
To music. Well, I'll tell you one thing that influenced me a lot is that one summer my father had one of his colleagues invite me to the Howard University medical school, and I visited the cadaver room. And I can still smell the formaldehyde in my nose, because that changed my mind. If there were any doubt that I was going to not go to medicine, it was seeing people carved up like Thanksgiving turkeys. You know, yeah. I mean, it's just.
I have a problem with that myself.
Yeah. So anyway,
I wanted to go into medicine as well. And your godson.
Yes.
My son.
Yes.
Alan Gabriel Marcel, right? He went from the age of 2. He wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
He just had his 13th birthday yesterday, and he still have it in mind.
13.
But I can see. I mean, it's in his DNA, because I wanted to be a doctor. I have quite a few members of my family who are doctors and medical profession, and his great-grandfather was a great doctor. So tell us, you have 2 books. I have 2 books here which I've read, and it's quite interesting. It's about your life story.
Right.
The Other Side of Tomorrow is the first one, Bevin Turnbull. Other Side of Tomorrow. Tell us a little bit about this book and what inspired you to writing this book.
Well, I was having a root canal, right? So I was
What
sitting.
does that have to do with it?
I was sitting in the chair of the dentist and having a root canal, and I said to myself, "This is one of the worst moments of my life. So maybe I'll think about some of the best moments of my life." And so, actually, I conjured up the first chapter of book one, sitting in that chair. I thought about taking my beautiful date at 17 years old, taking her to see Miles Davis at the Village Gate.
And you were 17. Wait.
At the time,
You were 17 years old.
at the time when I took her to the Village Gate. But this is many years later.
Okay.
You know, that I had the root canal, and so I just kept writing chapter after chapter after chapter based upon my life, but I made the character Janu Benin. And so it talks about the trials and tribulations and triumphs of a musician and travels. You know, there's a chapter in there about the Grand Canyon, where Janu Benin travels to the Grand Canyon to escape his first marriage. And then he also...
And of course, that's you.
Well, yes.
Okay.
And then there's a chapter about a trip to Japan, which was wonderful. I took a group to Japan. We were in Osaka for 7 weeks, and that was quite an experience.
Now, what were you doing there?
With my band.
With your band.
The band was called Triad at the time. Triad, before we became New Jazz City.
Okay.
It was Triad.
Yeah, and then you have The Other Side of Tomorrow, Part 2.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
you didn't have enough space in Part 1. You had to have a sequel, huh?
Well, life progressed, and I had a daughter. And so the second one is called Letters to My Daughter. So all the time that we...
And your daughter's name is?
Tara.
Tara.
Tara Turnbull.
Tara
Yeah.
Turnbull.
By the way, she's graduating. She has graduated from UCLA in theater arts and philosophy, and she's working on her PhD. She got her master's and she's
Very
working on her
good.
PhD. I'm very proud of her.
Very well. So you've also have done some a few movies, short movies.
Right.
Tell us about.
Right.
The first one was Solomon.
Right. King Solomon's
King
Reign.
Solomon's Reign. Tell us quickly. We have a short clip of that.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Well,
About the clip in which we're going to see.
you were very much involved. Very much involved.
was.
You directed it.
I did.
Yes, you
Oh,
did,
my
and you played a part in it also. I was really struck by a sermon that was given by our minister at the time at St. Luke's about wisdom. He said, "Get wisdom, and with thy getting, get understanding." And so that whole idea of Solomon and his wisdom really attracted me. Plus, the other idea that attracted me is the connection between the Queen of Sheba, who was from Ethiopia, not the small country, not the country of Ethiopia, but a large part of Africa was looked upon and called Ethiopia at the time. And I explored that connection between Ethiopia and Israel, right? So the King Solomon coming together with the Queen of Sheba really unites a segment of history that is fascinating.
Okay, let's take a look. Let's take a look of Solomon, Queen of Sheba.
We wish to see King Solomon.
We can use his wisdom to settle our problem. King Solomon, these two women have a problem that only you can solve.
Is that right? Tell me, ladies, how can I help you?
Your Highness, this woman and I live in the same house. A few days ago, I gave birth. And shortly after that, I also give birth to a child.
Last night her child died. While I was asleep, she took my child from my arms and replaced it with her dead baby.
She is lying. King Solomon, the dead baby is her child. The child that is still alive is my
You are
child.
the one who is lying.
Oh, why are you never telling the truth?
Ladies, I have an idea of how we can settle this dispute. Leo, bring me my sharpest sword. Now, Leo, divide the child in two, giving half to each woman.
No! No! Don't! My lord, do not do this. Give her the child even though it is not hers.
No, divide it. That is fair. Neither one of us will have it then.
Silence! I now know who is the true mother of this child. I give the child to you, son. For you have proved that by choosing life for the child, that you are the one who actually gave birth to it.
King Solomon, you are the wisest of rulers.
Yes, we are back with Bevin Turnbull, and that was King Solomon's reign. And our next sequel to that was Job.
Job, the patience of Job.
Patience of Job.
Right.
Quickly tell us a little bit of it.
Well, Job went through some tremendous trials, and you did a wonderful job playing Job. And,
Well, let's see him.
okay.
Let's go to the video.
As thou considered my servant Job, for there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth me and escheweth evil.
Wherever there's disaster, death, and trouble, my demons are there always. Calamity and chaos, wretchedness and hatred are all under my command. Now my victim is this man. He'll be helpless in my hands. About the earth, to and fro, up and down, across the globe, he will cry for his soul, Mr. Job!
It's the love of the Lord, the faith of a saint, the power of prayer to get through the day, a whole lot of soul, and the patience of Job, and the patience of Job.
Maybe the very cause of all of this. Don't even look at me.
Break your heart in half days. You and you alone. It takes the love of the Lord, the faith of a saint, the power of prayer to get through the day. A whole lot of soul and the patience of Job. And the patience of Job. Job.
do that again, please?
Yes, The Patience of Job. In which you did the music, you wrote the music, your idea of doing, and you also was a cameraman on that.
And editor.
And editor.
I really
Yes.
felt good about that, yeah.
You learn editing.
But you encouraged me. You encouraged me because some of the things that happened in that endeavor, you made them happen through your encouragement and your direction.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, after doing those two, you started getting better at this stuff.
Yes, yeah.
And what was the third project?
Revelations.
Revelations. Tell us quickly about it.
Well, I've always been interested in Revelations because I didn't understand it. And then once I began to understand it, it frightened me to death. Right? And so
Why?
I really wanted us to do this to get that out of my system, get the fear out of my system.
Oh, now you tell me, right?
Right.
Okay.
So, I enjoyed writing the music to that and just developing a greater and greater understanding as we went along.
Okay. So let's go to Revelations. Let's see a little bit of that.
Behold, I make all things new. I will give freely unto him of the fountain of the waters of life. It is I, Jesus. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright and morning star.
He that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. I am he that liveth, and was dead. And behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And have the keys of hell and of death. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. Behold, I make all things new.
Yes. Oh, wow. That's interesting. Well, we're running out of time, but just before we finish, I want you to briefly tell us about the musical that's coming up December 7th, New Jazz City, the musical, and also give your contact.
Yes. It's going to be, New Jazz City, the musical is going to be at the Renaissance, at the Residence Inn, Marriott. That's in the Metro Center in the Bronx. And it's going to be December 7th, and it's going to be from 5 to 7. And my contact information is bjazz7@aol.com. That's the easiest way to send me information. bjazz7@aol.com.
Bevin, I thank you so much for coming on the show, and I got to have you back very soon.
Thank you so
'cause
much.
We have a lot more to cover.
Right.
You know, and of course, before we have to talk more about the musical New Jazz City.
Yes,
You
I'm
know.
honored to have been here. Yes.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to World's Indigenous Peoples. Again, until next time.
Bevin and Ron started as Triad around 1980. Eventually, Doc and Tony replaced Errol and Ron and evolved into New Jazz City. Gina has been our vocalist since the early days. Now we look forward to the future of our being sponsored to create broadcast quality video recordings representing live, acoustic, and electronic jazz for the 21st century. Here we are now. Mike, the atomic drummer, Dr. Charles Butler on bass, and me, Bevin, on piano, keyboards, and trumpet. Thank you for listening.